Hi stock investors, JJ here, welcome back. Well, right now I'm going to react to this video about the announcement of JD Vance, or Vance, you say tomato, I say tomato, and how that will affect stocks. And the clip is JD Vance's attitude towards tech comes into question on the VP announcement. So let's see what's going on here.
Former President Trump announcing Ohio Senator JD Vance as his presidential running mate. But despite Vance's longtime ties to Silicon Valley as a former venture capitalist, his attitude toward tech regulation is not as straightforward as you might expect. Our Deirdre Bose is digging into that for today's Tech Check. Morning, Dee.
Hey, good morning, Carl. Vance's loyalty and politics, they reside firmly with little tech. So any optimism.
So big tech versus little tech, that seems to be, the conjecture going on here. He has had ties to Peter Thiel as well in the past. So that's going to be something that they'll talk about, I'm sure.
That another Trump administration would be friendlier or at least less hostile to big tech. That deserves another look, as do any deals that will undergo regulatory scrutiny, like Google's $23 billion bid for cybersecurity startup Wiz, which one analyst yesterday called just the tip of the iceberg in a massive M&A cycle for big tech for 2025 if Trump wins. Vance posted earlier this.
That was Dan Ives saying that. He was on here yesterday talking about that deal, that Google deal, the M&A deal. Will this trigger some sort of M&A bonanza with tech in the future? This deal with cybersecurity deal with Google, but that's a side issue.
This year, it's time to break Google up, calling it the most important election integrity issue. He's also been critical of Meta, Apple, Amazon, part of what he calls the big tech oligarchy. He's even called the FTC's Lina Khan one of the few people in the Biden administration that, quote, I think is doing a pretty good job.
Wow, so that's significant. Lina Khan being very critical of big tech and the monopolies going after them, or seeming to, asking questions and, actually taking action there. And so JD Vance, is he in her camp here? That's quite a big issue with, with the Trump, any Trump administration, which is looking more likely now after the weekends of Vance has definitely gone up. The chances of him being elected have definitely gone up. But again, vice president doesn't have a lot of power. That seems to be the case in history.
Acknowledging that his support of Khan's aggressive antitrust stance that sets him apart from most of his Republican colleagues. It gets murky here as well. As a VC, he backed startups like Rumble. That's a conservative video platform that stands to benefit if YouTube is more regulated. His other investments through...
Okay, I'm not sure I'll just correct in there. I'm not sure it's a conservative platform, really. The creators that tend to go on there are definitely lean in that direction, but we have others over there who aren't on that. It just happens to have been that way, that people go on there that aren't able to post other places, and that does tend to lean conservative. But it's not a conservative platform. It's more of a self-appointed free speech platform, really.
Through Narya Capital, we're at the earliest stages of a startup's life. Series A, B, when competing against the incumbents, is toughest. One insider at a well-known startup incubator here tells me that Vance is the silver lining for little tech if Biden loses the election. Another at a mega cap brushed off that selection, telling me that Trump has said worse and Biden is actually trying to break up big tech. Now, whether Vance keeps that anti-big tech stance in a Trump administration, that is an open question. But in the meantime, it could help to rally support among more Silicon Valley leaders, especially those that are aligned with little tech. His ties, they go back to Peter Thiel, one of the first major tech figures to throw his support behind Trump in the 2016 election. More recently, he has been close to VC David Sachs and a growing circle.
That's David Sachs there. If you don't recognize him, he is on the All In podcast, very popular podcast. He's very outspoken. He's getting more and more into politics, and seems to be being successful here. He looks happy about the appointment here, and whether it's going to be good for little tech, which really means startups in Silicon Valley. So there are a lot of sort of tech leaders, including Elon Musk, that's not really little tech, is it? Big tech, but getting behind Trump.
Circle of tech elites that have been switching camps ahead of the election. Mark Andreessen, Ben Horowitz, two well-known names in the Valley, also planning to donate to Trump's reelection. The important nuance here, guys, is for M&A, and investors will have to thread this. Can you crack down on big tech while allowing them to buy key startups like Wiz? Are those deals reasonable exits for VCs, or does it cement big tech's dominance? That's going to be a question as we get closer to the election.
Yeah, and not necessarily one for a vice president either, if they get elected, right? It's going to be an interesting question for whoever might be chosen for DOJ and FTC.
That's a good point. I mean, the vice president, does that position even matter? When we think back to, say, Biden during the Obama years, do they really have that much influence, that much power? Perhaps more influence than power, but it really doesn't matter that much. It's a more symbolic really, isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong there. Let me know in the comments if that's not the case.
FTC. Right. And I think that part of the current thinking, Deirdre, is that it's so bad now under the current regime with Cantor and Khan that it can only get better in a more business-friendly environment. At least that's the narrative.
And there's one name, you just mentioned it, that always comes up as sort of the antitrust bulldog, and that is Lina Khan, seen as one of the toughest regulators in decades. And the fact, though, that J.D. Vance has mentioned her and praised her may not bode well for some of the investors who think that she could be replaced with someone who is more lenient. We don't know who's going to influence who, though. And remember, too, that Trump himself was really hard on big tech as well. Is he going to create a friendlier business environment for M&A activity while still cracking down on big tech? That's a possibility. But I think now the question that is introduced with J.D. Vance is, how do you also protect little tech?
Is an interesting question here. We see one of the things we've seen just in the last few days is more tech leaders coming out to support Trump, and now this. Maybe they knew this was coming. David Sachs might have known in the background there. We just don't know. But there are tech leaders, and even on that podcast, we have Chamath coming out and supporting. We have Trump. We have Elon. So many leaders, and part of it is this: will they be friendlier to tech in general this time around, and for tech entrepreneurs involved in smaller tech, which does include some of these people for sure. Will that make a difference? That remains to be seen. So if you want to hear more about this, I'm going to leave a subscription link on the screen for ongoing if you want to just follow along. This is a relatively new channel. Also, I'm going to leave a link to a video that YouTube thinks that you might want to watch next. The algorithm is usually pretty good at choosing videos. Might be one of mine, it might not. So thanks for watching to this one, and I'll see you in the next one.